Most predictions we hear about AI are probably wrong. The current round of large language model or LLM based services have rushed into the public so fast, we barely have had a chance to figure out what to use them for before a new model is released with all new capabilities. There's no question LLMs will be disruptive at work, but the question of when, how much, and what they will disrupt is still a guessing game. From subsidized cost to ever increasing risks of hallucinations or data leakage, the perfect use case might not be so perfect. What's a business leader to do to not become this century's horse and carriage? In episode 13 of EB Spoke the podcast, Experimenting at the Edge of AI, my guest Priya Sarathy suggests in her new book, the answer is to encourage experimentation with the appropriate guardrails. So let's dive in. Thanks for joining us today. My guest is Priya Sarathy. She has recently written a book about AI, the AI Leadership Compass, Lead with Clarity, 7 Moves That Power AI Transformation. Priya and I have known each other for quite some time, and we've been talking about data analytics, and how critical those are to the AI world. And so when she mentioned that she'd written this book, you got to come out and talk about your perspective. And so I'd love to hear first, what motivated you, what prompted you to be writing this book?
Thank you first for having me on your podcast. It's an opportunity and it's so timely. So it gives me a chance to talk about this passion work of mine, which is the book. Now, what prompted me to do this? There are 2 things that actually happened and transpired over the last many years that I've been working. Well, the first thing, I have always been an AI leader, whether it's as a data science leader or as an advanced analytics leader. And typically in the companies that I worked with, it has always been at the edge. And what do I mean by that? It has been that new technology is coming into new ways of handling data. So as a data leader or an AI leader, it has always taken an extra motivation, not just to make the project successful, but also to bring the team together. And what I found that as a leader, getting that project done successfully is not about just getting the model done right. And so over the years, working in analytics, I found that there is a need for becoming a bridge across different teams that come and talk and work with you and partner with you. So that was one of those aha moments collected over many years of experience. But the second thing is in the last 3 years, what I've seen is it suddenly had a change in the way we are using analytics. It's kind of moved to almost a back office mode. We have generative AI come in the front and say, it's very simple to access. We can democratize the use of AI, which is quite complex on the back office, but in the front end, it's kind of seems easy. I would say it seems, because now AI leaders are kind of a little confused. What are we going to do? How are we going to do this? Are we going to manage the front end or the back end? Or how do we kind of bridge? So the bridge that I talked about before from when it was pure AI and pure analytics has now kind of morphed. So I felt that need that there's a gap and there's a need to kind of create this guidebook in a sense that allows the leaders to say, how do we balance between the front end and the back office complexity? So that's where the book came up, and that's the structure I also gave it to the book is as almost like a guide to senior leadership when they are getting ready to, or they're already involved in AI. It's more about how should we think about leadership specific to AI in the AI ecosystem. That's how I ended up writing the book.
That's awesome. Yeah, and we're going to dive into a lot of those details. I'd love to take a step back, though. Give us an introduction of yourself and your background leading up to this.
Absolutely. So as I said, I've been an AI leader. So my roles have evolved from being analytics to data science and now AI. So I worked for more than 25 years in many Fortune 500 companies. And the reason why I said we were at the edge working at new techniques was because I was working with AT&T. And at that time, we had Bell Labs very closely working with us. And then IBM, again, we were thinking about all the new ways in which B2B can be enhanced and augmented for supporting sales. Then I worked in the banking and the fintech center in the last 10 years or so with Equifax, where I was last worked at. And that was really interesting because they were going through a digital transformation, moving to the cloud and moving all the AI systems to the cloud. So that gave me a firsthand confirmation of what the gap is really in leadership, what leadership needs from having to handle such a transformation. More recently, I started my own company, Wheel Data Strategy, and through that, I'm trying to approach my business in three ways. One is evangelization and trying to see if I can communicate, don't make these mistakes again kind of scenarios through workshops, through talking and speaker engagement. But also, I feel passionate about helping startups and medium sized companies. The reason being, what we have today with AI has so much to offer, so much that people, companies, and organizations can really leverage and, if used effectively, really jump, leapfrog on their growth scale much faster than bigger organizations typically can. And the third one is teaching, of course. I've run a few workshops, and I want to continue doing that to spread the word of good leadership in AI.
You mentioned you don't make those mistakes. In the book, even you described as a guide for leadership. And so I know that you have the concept of the 7 moves that power AI transformation. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that. What does that mean, and how do we apply that to if we are senior leaders working on AI projects or bringing AI into our company?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I was thinking about what was important for AI, there are many things. And so I picked the 7 that I think really symbolize the mental mind shift that we have to adopt as leaders in this new ecosystem. I divided those 7 moves looking at one, the strategic vision and how we have to change thinking strategically about AI. For example, one of the things we always heard is align your AI goals to the business goals. I kind of try to look at it more from business value rather than goals. Goals are absolutely measurable, but also adding value to the business can come in other forms and other metrics and measures. So, how should a AI leader think about it? Right? Think about understanding what the business value is and how you can align your AI led, AI embedded, AI integrated, whatever be the initiative in which there's some application of AI or it is the main application. How do you kind of assess that business value so that you can understand how quickly, how long, how much the impact of your project or your deliverable is going to be? At the same time, we need to put on the mindset of we're not talking about POCs. We're talking about long-term scaling at the enterprise level because AI is unfortunately good when it is in single use cases, but it is more impactful when that use case is kind of reused and reapplied in other scenarios and domains. That being said, that I emphasize is one of the moves that one needs to think about. I'm not telling you what it is your company needs, but how do you think about it so you can take and realize what it is in your system, in your organization, it will translate to? So in the same sense, I also focus on culture because I think it is almost, to me, not just a small aha moment, but an aha moment I had throughout my career or throughout what I see is happening is without a culture, the use of AI is going to be very limited, not optimal. When 10 years ago, analytics, machine learning was kind of focused in marketing. Now you have to think about AI as an enterprise application. And so to have that, you need to have a culture that is opening, adopting the concept, the responsibilities that go with an AI ecosystem in a meaningful manner. And so I focus on one of the other moves is about AI fluency, but not just simple AI fluency. It's about what I call as trilingual, which means your language of fluency has to get expanded, not just to technology, not just to data, but also to the AI piece. All three together is going to be your trilingual fluency. And I believe a lot that the culture is more important. So I kind of also take one other move, which is going to be education. It is not about doing a domain-specific knowledge checklist, but it's also learning continuously about what I call as a trilingual, the fluency across the 3 areas. So that is just some of the example. The other pieces of the 7 moves are how do you govern? How do you manage people? How does the leader have to think about not being an issuer of commands, but more of an orchestrator of the different ecosystems, the people, the partners, the clients, all of them are an ecosystem. So you need to be an influencer in the social media terms in getting people to work together, to think together in a very responsible and ethical manner. So those are some of the 7 moves. So I could go on. So I'm going to stop here because there's more in the book.
Well, I think we want to dive into some of
Yeah.
those, right? So you caught me at the trilingual fluency. And so if you haven't read the book, if you haven't heard that term before, obviously you might think about multilingual human
Right.
languages. But if you're in the IT space, you might say, well, obviously I can speak human, I can speak English or whatever human language. I can also write code, so I can talk to the computer. And maybe you can even speak finance or business or some other kind of domain specific
Yeah.
language. And then we have this idea of prompt engineering where now we have to be able to communicate with an AI in a special way. Is that what you mean by that? Or maybe what does trilingual fluency mean when you describe
Right.
it?
So, one has to think as a business leader holistically. You can't come from the technology world and say, hey, I know technology, I know architecture, so I know all about the data too. It's not so much just knowing about it, but you got to kind of understand AI built into it. You have to know what is it capable of doing to the data and what is it capable of extracting from the data. We may know about prompt engineering, development, code, and all that AI can be used. But the question again I would ask them is, what are you going to build in or kind of understand and ask the questions of the developer who you're leading? What is the pros and cons of developing? Where is the likelihood of the mistakes? Am I going to be capable of getting the effective level of delivery? And I think this comes with some kind of awareness, not just of the code you're developing, that's your domain of expertise, but also the impact of the code can have on other things downstream. I would say we need, as technology leaders, we even need to know as data science leaders. I'm not saying this just because I'm from data science, I know everything. Absolutely not. We need to understand the customer. And I think these may have been called as a soft skills in the past, but I think this is getting more concrete skills that we need to develop, if that's the term or a reverse of soft, because until we know where and how and why, when using AI to undertake our tasks in our own functional areas, what could be the impact or what should we be measuring and when should we be monitoring? So these are questions that we normally left another team to do. But as we develop it, we need to think about it. We need to make sure we monitor our domain, our functional expertise against that. So that's why it's like making it more substantive part of our learning and awareness rather than one-off. I may be just lucky to have that experience.
Earlier, you mentioned the idea that AI is an enterprise application. And with that, not only comes the integrations, right? What's the upstream? What's the downstream impact that it has? Where does it fit into the ecosystem? Obviously, I have a cybersecurity perspective.
Yeah.
And so there's a whole branch of that can be
Mm-hmm.
interesting. The interesting challenge with enterprise applications is there's a change management process that can make it very hard for an organization to adopt it, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of that is to protect resources, to protect the information. But AI is something that's moving so fast that if you use those older methods to approve it, by the time you approve an AI product or an application or methodology, it may actually be outdated and not
Yeah.
worth the effort. How do you encourage organizations to think about, yes, AI is an enterprise application, but you also have to be able to experiment and pull that, whatever's happening today, into your organization to understand it?
I think you had hit the most talked about and most sensitive spot in AI enablement, which is one is the security, and is typically what I'm thinking of is security at the edges.
Yeah.
Because when you have a centralized governance system, then you're really confident you're doing everything right. But as you move further and further away from the centralized governance, you're moving to the periphery, the edges of where you're interacting with a customer, your user, outside the firewall. And that's where you have less of a oversight on what is happening. One of the things I talk about in the book is not just innovation at the edge, because I think that is where what we see today is new applications, new use cases are happening at that extreme parts of an organization because they are in touch with the customers, they're in touch with the users. From a security point, you're right. You're in touch with how its access is being compromised from the outside to the inside. It takes a little more time when you start looking at how is access being compromised from inside to outside. That is the second part of a gut reaction. In the same way, innovation at the edge also requires audit at the edge. For example, there are a lot of creative use cases from content development and marketing, UI, UX design, and all those are not getting monitored on a day-to-day basis, right? So it is where those are the sectors that are going to be most attracted by the use of generative AI solutions solutions and other AI that kind of feed into their content creation, feed into how advertising is done online. So my call to action is, while you may not have the ability to control if the best practices are being used, it's up to the business leaders to think about within their teams or the teams reporting to them, how should they be putting down best practices, AI fluency, AI awareness of each of you have to do your task, you have to experiment. But this is the scope. These are the limitations from ethical, security, and restful use of AI that you need to use as a guideline. Beyond that, I would say the best is to give the autonomy and have that innovation happen organically. Because if you start putting too many rules, then people are like, okay, if I do this, I'm going to get pulled up. I'll be the person left and everybody else steps back in the line, right? I'm the only one who's left. Not raising my hand, but everybody was smarter and did a quick retreat. I think that's the way one leadership needs to balance. And I think reflecting upon that is important. It's very important for the leaderships to do. So in the book, the way I kind of define is, here are some questions that you need to ask yourself. And based on the questions, the call to action says, hey, these are the things you may want to audit. How do you set up, identify these places where it becomes an experimentation? Organically, new ideas are being generated, new use cases of AI. What is your role? You need to guide them. How do you guide them? Make sure there's alignment. You need to align your team to say, hey, I'm okay with innovation, but please have a checklist of, is it going to impact the business value? Going back to the first move. If you set expectations and they respond to it, then I think it's a win-win on both sides, for the leadership as well as the teams that innovate.
And so you talk a lot about the innovation at the edge and the idea that you still have centralized governance and how to balance that, right, between those two.
Yeah.
But then what's the counter question? What if we just skip the centralized governance? Let's just innovate at the edge and see what happens.
It's a good question. Should I ask you why not? I think what we need to think about is, the last 3 years, all of us individuals have really adopted the new tools that have become available to us. We are not regulating ourselves, but we are learning from our experiences and building best practices of what to do, what not to do, how to do it, how to use it. So I think if I reflect back, when it came to other introduction of cloud, the internet, in the last 20 years, with the use of internet, prolific use of email, anything that Gmail offers, you sign up for an email and you get all the spam, you had a hard time controlling it. And organizations realized that's a problem. And it took them some years to develop the ability to monitor the security internal to the organization so that there is no leaks by mistake. You're not opening viruses and malware. And that took some time. When I go back to the first statement I made, as human beings, as personal users of AI, we have become more responsible because it affects us. So the question is, by transporting that individual responsibility into the professional world is what we need to do. You cannot go around with a stick or hold a carrot. I don't think that works. But we do know that the personal use cases of AI are now kind of seeping into the organization. So organizations have a leg up. People are now smarter about how they use and access AI. Now the question is to give them the scope, the expectation. And yes, if you don't have a centralized system, you want to make sure that everybody is trained appropriately on, hey, this for my organization are the best practices. Now be responsible, and we'll give you anything to support you to be responsible, and feedback. And I think feedback is kind of important. You monitor the milestones and say, hey, this was not right, but we can limit the risk to a small area for a small POC. It's not scalable. But to really focus that any innovation done internally, without that autonomy, with that autonomy at the edges, has to meet the alignment with the business goals. And I think that conversation for business leaders is so critical. So yes, you may not have a centralized, you may have a federated. I would say is everybody has a stake in the goodness, the wellness, the success of AI. So I think it has to be more federated, where I am a business leader in one domain, in one department, one functional unit, and I'm sitting at the table talking to my peers.
In the book, you do have some great examples of success stories, some real world examples. I think Unilever, John Deere, Mod Pizza, for example. What about those stood out? Why did they make the cut, and what's interesting about them to you?
Right. So when I was looking, and I think these are the questions that many organizations are asking, right? How do I roll out to AI to the entire enterprise? And so the question you asked before about balancing autonomy over centralized governance is an important thing, but not really practical when organizations are becoming bigger and bigger, right? So when I was thinking about the reverse, so what happens with innovation at the edge? How does it happen? So in all these three scenarios, the use cases that I provided, there has been a need that was identified from the way things were being worked. So with John Deere, which was about precision engineering, early on, the use of AI was taking a drone, because drone was the latest in technology at some years back, using drone images to capture how your farm is looking, whether the seedlings are growing or whether the cotton crop is not budding, it's kind of drying up. All these things were being translated from image to data to analysis in a centralized space. The drone can carry a limited number of issues. So there were more of strategic challenges in how it was used. So then from the field, the feedback that came is, instead of taking the data to a hub for processing and then reacting to it, let's bring the reaction closer to the field, to the edge. So now John Deere is building tractors where they have equipped the tractors with cameras and they have fertilizers and they're connected. So as the tractor or the plow, whatever the equipment is truly and appropriately called, moves through the field, it is using its sensors to capture, process that image in small sections. So the data usage and computation is much more smaller. And it's reacting at that edge to deliver the appropriate measures for improvement. So to me, that was one important thing. The second one I talk about is the Mod Pizza. When they were trying to scale up, they wanted to bring AI to the people, to the shop location. So they first tested it out on a small scale. So the experimentation was one location was taught how to use it. They were given the training and made AI aware. And the manager was more of an AI fluent manager. And they coordinated and tried to use the information in an effective way. So their training and their use case was an experiment. And at that level, at that edge, it worked. And there was kind of a significant increase in the efficiency and the maintenance cost of the location. And so that edge training was one aligned to the goals of the business. It was adding value, and there was training and continuous education for the folks working there. So this allowed you to translate this part of the 7 moves. What does it take to make that POC a successful POC and scale to an enterprise level? And so those are the two examples that are there in the book that appeal to me, that if you want to have innovation at the edge, support the folks, support the teams, give them the tools and the equipment they need, and test it out at the edge. And then once it works, then you're ready to scale it. But to make sure this is scalable and adoptable by other units, you have to have the other units be observers in this POC. And that's where I said having that federated where everybody sits at the table and is talking helps in kind of generating the leadership mindset that allows them to then train their team leaders as well.
I want to get your take on some of the cautionary tales of what maybe was that innovation at the edge, or maybe it wasn't. And that's what I'm curious about. So in the airline industry, we've got two stories. One, Air Canada, who lost a lawsuit because AI chatbot hallucinated a briefing policy that didn't exist, and people relied on it and they lost. And then, of course, more recently, Delta Airlines had a lot of negative press because they said they were going to use AI to give each of us our own special personalized pricing. And they backed away from that. Both of those feel like innovation at the edge to me, but also did not have the outcome that the company desired. How do we put cautionary tales to use too?
Again, I think that comes with responsible AI. So if you advertise what it is without consulting within the team, it's going to have repercussions, but that's one. But also the question is, what is it that they have used? Now, to me, as a company that's trying to capitalize on data, they were probably doing what they best could because they're optimizing revenue. Now, there have been cases, and as a data scientist, I will talk to this, that when you use data, you don't typically use it with a person in mind. You use it with a behavior in mind. So it is behavioral data. On one side, behavioral data can help a company align it up to goal, but it feels so personalized. And I think it's a tough situation. It's a branding. It is your customer, how they view you as whether it's price gouging. And most likely we feel, and I share some similar sentiments, is as an economist, you can see that if I pay, say, $100 for a ticket or for a certain product, the next person comes in because I have just amped up the demand for a certain product. They said, okay, let's raise the price. So the next person who comes and buys after me is paying $110 for the same product. Then you're basically what is called extraction of consumer surplus, right? And so that level of personalization seems very threatening. And I think that's what happened with Delta. And I just think it is how you position it and how you use it. You really need some guidelines to say, we don't change prices so quickly. I think some kind of leadership is needed out here, definitely.
Well, and I think that they were experimenting at the edge and it got publicly talked about before it was ready to be talked about too, right? Dynamic pricing is nothing new.
Yeah.
Add the word AI and now everybody's worried.
Yeah. How often have you complained that when you're using the free Gmail account, you get spammed by the last email you wrote about something that you were interested in? And you have these pop-up ads. And we live with it because we felt that the value of having a free email account justifies getting spammed by all the advertisements. So I think there needs to be something similar. We adapt easily. We forget things easily.
One of the things that even I take away from the cautionary tales and you talk about in your book, it's fine to have the AI experimentation at the edge, but if you don't have a human in the loop to guide, moderate, control, then there's more risk. So talk a little bit about human in the loop. What's that mean? How do we leverage that?
So human in the loop, one of the ways people have addressed the fear that am I going to get replaced by AI? We know that when we moved from assembly line systems in the car manufacturing company to more of automated assembly lines, there was still the need for people because there is robots who kind of envision how things are put in. But since we are delivering this to a human and we have to look, what does the human look for? There is a need for some quality management at that level. So by human in the loop, what we mean is having that supervisor, having those monitoring specialists that you need to make sure even the smallest fluctuation, error, or a blip, even if that is being collected in an automated manner and sent to a console or your PC, the dashboard, even that needs to be caught and addressed because small problems, when done repeatedly, very fast, very quickly in real time, can signify a bigger problem that may go unnoticed, before which things may just collapse. We are not at the stage where we can say, robot, this RPA is perfect. So till that point in time, I think for currently, if you think about it, human in the loop is very essential. On YouTube, I remember reviewing a video on how NVIDIA, this manufacturing unit in Taiwan, which is like maybe 2 or 3 miles big, but no human touches the actual chip build. It's all robotic, airtight, vacuum sealed. But on the other end, other side of the mirror, you could see a whole team, an expansive array of people monitoring different metrics of the chip design. So those are an example of human in the loop because they are there with a specific reason. The other way to think about human in the loop is, as a business leader, when you ask those questions, is there alignment of the use of such a AI tool or AI application? You're going to get a response. If you were to put it in ChatGPT, that is the perfect thing to do. But over time with reasoning, ChatGPT will also tell you that make sure you monitor certain outcomes because they may not be trustworthy or they could be prone to error, machine error, AI algorithm error. The data training error is you may have not trained the AI algorithm. So those are things that require us to take responsibility, accountability on avoiding and mitigating the risks from AI. So, as I say, you can't fire AI, but you can put the blame and ownership and accountability on a human. And that is why, because we are humans, live in a human society where we interact with other individuals, that human touch is absolutely important to have and be in place.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great way to think about it. I would love to also make sure the listeners of this episode do get some practical advice. Obviously, the most practical advice, buy the book. It's available on Amazon. But for those busy executives who don't have time to read a book, what's a key piece of advice you can give them to encourage encourage that experimentation? How does an executive make sure that experimentation is supported in the organization?
I would say refer to chapter 1, etc. But truly speaking, the book is organized in a way that the executive on the go can pick the chapter where they have a mindset and look through it. It is giving you some examples, and if you even don't have time for it, there are questions that are built around executive reflections, call to action, and lessons learned. So those are 3 that you can skim at the end of each chapter that is kind of very quick nuggets that you need to take away. Because I believe that it's not about changing totally what leadership thinks and how it functions today. It is to give them the context with respect to AI. So when it comes to innovation and working with teams that are going to be innovating at the edge or using AI, I would say first thing is to have communication, empathic communication. Listen to them, understand what they're saying, and empower them. Empower them by providing them the right tools, the right guidelines, the right expectations of what you want to achieve from the point of the business. So that again kind of binds into communication, but also kind of links to education. So provide the tools also means provide the education or training for building that AI fluency, for building that responsible AI within each of your teams. Because as these thoughts and actions are influenced by these tools and the guidance, they're going to be more supportive and gain your trust. Gaining the trust of your team is important because when the teams believe you trust them, they begin to trust you. And that empowers that responsible AI in all their actions. Because as you mentioned, you cannot have a dictatorship in an organization. There needs to be autonomy for organic innovation. And it's up to each of the business leaders to think about how to provide that. So I do give some of these questions in the book as well.
I love that your suggestion to leaders is to basically have human conversations with their team when we're talking about AI to make sure that that part of it is covered. The other practical thing I know that you cover in the book, you have the idea of the audit the edge exercise. Maybe give us a sample of what that looks like.
Okay. Going back to what I suggested, that you need to be supportive as a business leader, how you need to think about it. So when it comes time to make sure it's happening, you really need to make sure you're auditing or monitoring what's happening. And that is a two-way street, right? The users, the experimenters, and the testers are aware that you're going to ask them questions. You are setting the standards. So you are looking at understanding, hey, what are the AI tools that you used? What did you use for this innovation? What are the pros and cons of this? Have you looked at it? Do you think there may be something that I should know about and plan for if there's a risk that may arise because of our use? So having this, again, human conversation, and again, going back to human in the loop, that is how AI leaders in the loop role kind of has evolved. They are the ones asking these questions. And then if you have some learnings that come out of your experiment or a POC, you want to share them with other stakeholders, because other teams using and doing their own testing might find some synergies or some value of sharing the story. Applaud the good work and talk through why it doesn't work and why it doesn't align to the business if a new experiment comes up. Maybe a different team may find value for it. It's not that everything should be a failure because you're looking at scaling at enterprise. Maybe it's just the wrong use case. And so as a business leader, being available to filter that and audit that and share allows the team to continue in the redirection that you have provided them rather than just say, oh, we tried, we give up.
Perfect answer. I think that's a great way to think about some practical takeaways. Again, the name of the book is AI Leadership Compass, Lead with Clarity, 7 Moves That Power AI Transformation. We're here talking with Priya. If they want to reach out to you, are you on LinkedIn? How do people get in touch with you if they want to learn more about you and what you're doing as a business?
Absolutely. I'm on LinkedIn under Priya Sarathy, and my company's name is Wheel Data Strategies, also in LinkedIn, or my website is www.wheelds.com. If you're interested in learning more, I have some snippets from the chapter and all that on my website for my book, which is priyasarathy.com.
And for those who might just be listening to this right now, would you mind just spelling out the name of your website as well?
Yes. The name of my company's website is Wheel, WHEELDS.com. Book website is going to be under PRIYASARATHY Sarathy.com.
As we wrap up today, obviously great advice, great way to think about AI as we bring it into our business, as we experiment at the edge, as we learn to govern it better. What's that one takeaway that we all need to be thinking about as we do that?
One key thing is support innovation at the edge. AI is meant to augment our skill sets, our capabilities, and that is best tested by innovation. I think we need to be confident ourselves. We need to become AI fluent, and that allows us to learn how to build that trust to make sure that you can contribute more successfully integrating AI to the business value. So those are my keywords, Erik.
That's great. Yeah. Well, thank you, Priya, for being on. I appreciate the thoughts, the wisdom, and the time it took you to produce that book as well. That's going to be a great thing. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Erik. Thank you for this opportunity again.
Thanks for listening to EB Spoke, the podcast. This podcast was produced by Erik Boemanns, founder of the fractional CTO and CISO firm Mirability, and features a wide variety of topics. Keep listening for more topics in the future, including cybersecurity, risk, compliance, and more.